Welcome back to Studio F, where on Fast Times Willy B, we'll be reviewing The Amazing Spider-Man. Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds. Welcome back to Fast Times Willy B. I'm Willy B. I got Mo back. Mo, how are we doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Excited to talk more Spider-Man.
Oh, absolutely. The best, in my opinion.
There we go. Already got the hot takes flowing. So, we're now to Andrew Garfield's movies, the Mark Webb movies, and that is The Amazing Spider-Man. I had Drew on for the Raimi trilogy. I'm going to have you on for Mark Webb's two films here, and we're going to start with The Amazing Spider-Man from 2012, directed by Mark Webb. What a name. Directing a Spider-Man movie.
Very fitting.
Yeah. Arguably, when you're talking about cast, probably the most star-studded, names, really big names, all over this cast. So Andrew Garfield, Emma Stone, Rhys Ifans, Martin Sheen, Sally Field, and then obviously Dennis Leary playing the captain. A lot of awards in this cast, a lot of Academy presence in this cast recently with Emma Stone. So you know you're going to get great performances across the board when you see this cast, and we did.
Yeah, I was going to say, with this cast especially, remembering this movie coming out and everything, a lot of people have been into movies, anything like that, Emma Stone made a breakthrough for herself and a name for herself, within the mid-2000s to late 2000s, and then that momentum just carried on and into this as well. This was also kind of what I would say is a breakthrough movie for Andrew Garfield.
Yeah.
He was in a lot of good movies before.
Yeah.
But this was the one. This was the breaking point for him, where a lot of people were starting to look up his films, wanting to see what has he done outside of a superhero type of movie.
Yeah.
And then starting to recognize he does great work, and it shows in this movie, and I'm glad to go in depth on this.
For sure. So we'll start with the good, and we can start with the cast. I think this was a very well casted movie. Whether you say Andrew Garfield's your favorite Peter Parker, or Sheen and Field are your favorite May and Ben, all of them had great performances in this movie. They may not be your favorite. You might let nostalgia win, and I get it. Rosemary Harris was awesome as well. But I thought this was probably the best group of actors we've gotten in a Spider-Man movie.
I would agree. And, their chemistry, all of them working together, especially Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, their duo throughout the entire film, there's not, one hiccup or, bump in the road with them. It's just the entire time you feel their chemistry just bouncing off one of another, and it goes so well with the story.
Oh, they have great on-screen chemistry, and they also, had a little bit of a relationship going on when this movie was going on, and that just seems to be the theme of Spider-Man movies. You date your female counterpart if you're Spider-Man, and I would say that this was my favorite relationship, this Spider-Man movie. This and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think that Garfield and Stone have better chemistry than Maguire and Dunst and Holland and Zendaya. And that's not discrediting any of those, because I think all three do a really good job at building that relationship, whatever path it takes them down. It's just, I don't know, from the moment that they first talk in class after he gets beat up by Flash, you just feel love.
It's like you said, not discrediting the others, but there's this small aspects, which it's the tiny things in their relationship between the two movies that really, bring you in to where you're this is, out of ranking them, this is your top, couple that you like. Yeah. And what really gets for me especially is the fact that instead of, in the other movies, it's Gwen Stacy as the love interest. It's not the typical MJ. It's Gwen Stacy, and being a fan of the comics and anything past Spider-Man, I've always been kind of always liked Gwen Stacy a bit more. Yeah. And the storylines that she has been involved in, as well as her romance with Peter.
Yeah. Like I said, not to discredit the others, but you kind of just get it too, in the sense that the trust they build off the rip. You know, he's at his first dinner over at her house. They're barely even a couple, and he's telling her that he's Spider-Man. It took Toby till the end of the second movie, and it took Tom till midway through the second movie, but MJ kind of found out on her own, not Tom telling her, Peter Parker telling her. I think that's another aspect I liked about it is, like, you can feel the trust and love so quickly. And it plays into that on-screen chemistry as well. I thought these two, just anytime they were on screen together, it was fun.
It was great, and even though, like, they can kind of... What I think their relationship also really helped capture was the nerdy, kind of awkward aspect of Peter Parker, because, like...
Of both of them, honestly.
Yeah, because in the first, like, kind of scene where they're talking, like, how when Uncle Ben is, like, helping Peter in the hallway, like, telling him you need to pick up Aunt May later, and he spots her in the corner, and he's just like, he's got you on his computer, and she, like... Then they
I'm his parole officer.
Yeah, and she just comes in and she's like, "Oh, I'm not on your computer, darn!" And how he's trying to ask her on a date.
Yeah,
but he keeps fumbling on it.
He's like, "Maybe we can do something else," and she's like, "Either are fine." Yeah.
Yeah, like either one, and it's like, well, which one? It was just maybe we can.
Yeah.
Maybe this, but just them playing like in that awkward bit. I don't know. It kind of gives you like a warm feeling of like, that's cute. You love that for them. And the whole dinner at her house with the revealing scene, it was...
Where he spins her, and she's like, he's like, shut up. But another thing, going with this relationship is a thing that gets knocked on this movie a lot is the writing. And I will agree, we'll get into it. The writing isn't the greatest, but when it comes to the relationship of Peter and Gwen, I think that's when the writing's at its best in The Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, that they spent, like, if they were, like, we have, like, some efforts of writing or that any bit that's salvageable of writing skill, we're going to put it into the chemistry between these two because I will agree, in the writing for some, like, other characters, like Dr. Connors, it's very poor. Yeah. And there is, like, if you want to nitpick between them, but... overall, the writing between them, at least, or their dialogue, is still fantastic.
I love the dialogue. I think another reason I like this relationship so much is because, like you said, we get MJ and the other two, and in the first MJ, she's like, the beauty queen, everybody loves her, she wants to be on Broadway. And in Tom Holland's trilogy, MJ is also a nerd, but she's not like your stereotypical nerd. She's like, hard-headed, kind of hard, like she's kind of scary, especially in the first movie. But... this one, you got number 1 and number 2 in the class, and they're both just two nerds falling in love. And I think that's why I love it so much, because they're so similar.
Yeah, and kind of how you brought up the class thing, like when they're in Oscorp, and he, like, gets caught of, like, who are you? She's like, oh, he's the second brightest in his class. He's like, second? You sure? Kind of, like, in front of everybody. They're, like, almost just, like, subtly, like, flirting. Yeah. And you're like, oh... So.
Yeah, and that's another part to the writing. I think the dialogue and writing between them two was done very well. Probably my favorite part of the story is Gwen and Peter.
Oh, absolutely. That is in the good column, like, for this review, for sure.
I think that this movie, and I think every Spider-Man movie I've ever watched, even, Spider-Verse animated, like, they all look so good. Like, the visuals, the cinematography. And in this one, we get a lot of color in New York City. There's a lot of the bright lights, the neon lights, and then, we get one of my favorite scenes is when they're lining up the, what are they called? They're lining up so he can swing through them because he just got his leg.
The cranes.
The cranes, yes.
Yeah, the construction
Huge
crane.
brain fart there.
Yeah.
But when they're lining up those cranes and you just see New York and he's swinging through it, that's such a well-shot scene, and the cinematography is really good in this film.
Absolutely, like the angles and everything. I've kind of really loved that they did it early in the movie, and then they repeated again, was the, like, point of view of Peter, like, after he makes his suit finally, and we get to see him, like, swing, and then the reveal of the final construction suit. It's not, like, him in his room on it, or him, like, landing somewhere. Landing somewhere is in, like, from a different perspective, but it's him landing on a window of a skyscraper, and our first full shot of the new suit is a reflection of him landing on that. I loved that scene, and also when he's doing that chase down in the city, like trying to get to Oscorp, where he kind of is doing like a point of view of like swinging from like the side of a building to another. the cranes, it did kind of bring in like New York life as well, showing
Yeah.
that like people are backing up like Spider-Man, and that
Yeah.
even though the news and the police are trying to make out that like he's a vigilante, he's a
Yeah.
bad guy, there's people that can tell
Yeah.
that he is doing good, he's trying to help the police, kind of like the argument that Peter was making at dinner.
Yeah.
That some people would probably see him as a hero, and those construction workers were those ones who saw the good that he was trying to do.
The boss, dealt with him firsthand with the bridge, because his son was the one that was saved on the bridge in the car. Also, another great scene. Just like you said, very well used shots. You talked about the Spidey suit. I love the Spidey suit in this movie. I still would probably say Tobey's is my favorite, but this one isn't far behind. And I'm hoping the one we saw at the end of No Way Home from Tom's will put him more in contention, because I like Tom's suits. It's just they're very Iron Man-y. Like
Yeah,
I don't know.
They get a lot of Iron Man influence since due to like the, I would say, mentorship that like this Spider-Man in the MCU currently has had from Iron Man.
But we get a snippet of his new suit that he built himself, and that's why I think it's going to be in contention with Garfield and Maguire's, because he sewed it himself. But this suit is a really good suit.
I do really love this one. A lot of people, if they discuss about the two movies, they say that the second movie suit is better. I just really love something about the yellow.
Yeah.
The yellow eyes for that. It really gets me. And also in this one, it's like just noticing the small details. Like for his feet, they kind of have like steel toe or like a steel covering on the heel and the toes. Mm-hmm. And I like that detail because when he's swinging and if there's light, you can see the reflection off of those too.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that because to think that when he's like digging his heel into something or his toe, that it's just the costume that's only holding a part, it kind of just gets to me on the inside.
Yeah. No, the suit's done really well. Continuing with, we've talked about some of the scenes we've loved. I think that something Mark Webb's Spider-Man movies does really, really well is the presence of emotion.
Absolutely.
I think that he does a really good job at finding a way to jerk the tears, and that especially in the second one, which we'll talk about next week. But even in the first one, I mean, with Uncle Ben's death and the scenes of Peter after and how you can tell he's struggling, and the car scene on the bridge, that one's kind of a tearjerker too, because he's trying to save that kid, and you can tell he's struggling and the kid's scared, and Mark Webb does a really good job at conveying emotion.
Yeah, and
the captain dying too.
Yeah, and I would say one other scene that you could really feel the emotion in was right before Uncle Ben's death, like at the house.
Yeah.
When he's like, you need to step up, you need to be a man.
Yeah.
And like you have responsibilities. Your dad lived by those, and just hearing like Andrew Garfield just does it amazing, where it's Peter just breakdown of like, if that's what my dad lives by, then where is he?
Yeah.
Was I not enough of a responsibility for him?
Yeah.
Why am I not hearing this from him, but I have to hear it from you?
Yeah.
You have to pick up his responsibilities. That's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the storming out.
Breaking the door.
Mm-hmm. It played so well.
Yeah, I think Martin Sheen and Sally Field are really, really good Ben and May. I love them. They feel a lot like my grandparents, so it hit a little harder given what happened recently in my life, but I guess this was the first time I realized how much I liked them as Ben and May. I think Martin Sheen was an awesome Uncle Ben. He has his comedic elements, like when he's in the school, and then he has his parts where he's playing dad.
Yeah.
And that's that scene. And, you talk about how great Andrew was, and Andrew was phenomenal. I mean, Andrew's the standout in this film, but Martin Sheen was really good in that argument as well. And then, after we lose Uncle Ben, Sally Field has her moments where she's, Peter will come home battered and bruised, and she's like, pulling him in for a hug, or at the end, when Gwen's leaving, and he's like, she goes, "Did you ask her out?" And he goes, "I'm not good enough for her." And, she goes on her tangent. If there's one thing you are, that's good. And, I really like their Ben and May.
I do a lot, especially Aunt May, like how you mentioned when he would come home, beat up. That scene still gets to me a lot as well, when he just, comes in, ducks his head immediately into the fridge, and he's like, "You don't gotta wait up for me." And she's like, "What do you mean? I have to."
Yeah.
And then he's, just trying to yell, "Go to sleep. Just go to sleep, Aunt May. Don't worry about me."
Yeah.
And she's like, "I can't." I can't because
Yes, that scene too. Oh
I
my
can't
God.
because what happened to Ben, and now you're out late all night, and look at your eyes. She's like, how am I supposed to get sleep?
Yeah.
Because I've just lost Uncle Ben, and now you're out doing reckless stuff, and I don't know if you're coming home.
Yeah.
That scene really hit a lot for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to pick a favorite Aunt May because I think we've gotten three really good ones. Rosemary Harris was awesome. Sally Field, great. And then obviously, when I get into the Tom Holland movies, Marisa Tomei was great too. But I would go off to say that Martin Sheen is probably my favorite Uncle Ben. And I know that might stir some feathers and not sit well with some people because of the original Uncle Ben. I mean, we never get a third Uncle Ben, but because of the original Uncle Ben, I loved Martin Sheen.
He was great, and yeah, it might like be as like you have been saying for me, always backing up this movie. It's a hot take,
Yeah.
but I do love him a lot as
Yeah.
Uncle Ben.
For sure.
He's more welcoming, kind of exactly like how Peter has always described, and if reading the comics, anything like that, he plays the role so well.
Yeah.
And that's why, other than this being my favorite Spider-Man movie, he's also my favorite Uncle Ben.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm glad we agree there.
Yeah, for once.
I will say, there is flaws with this movie, and we'll get into them in the bad and the bad, but this movie has a lot of heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing it's got going for it. This movie has a lot of heart, and that goes to the emotional side of things I was talking about. This is a feel-good movie, but it also lets you cry a good tear. Like, it lets you pour out a little bit. And I think that's why I have a soft spot for it. I'm not saying it's my favorite or it's the best Spider-Man movie of all time. I know it's up there for you. But I do enjoy this movie quite a bit, and I would go as far as saying I love watching this film.
I do too, and I think that, like how you said, it gets emotional. It kind of gives you, like, I would say, like, a perspective, kind of like a scoping as to, like, how grim or kind of, like, gruesome it can be.
Yeah.
Being Spider-Man.
Yeah.
That, like, coming to save the city has a price.
Yeah, for sure.
And just, it overall captures everything from start to finish of, like, living your normal life, but still having some baggage, and then you're just gonna have to, like, keep tackling through obstacle to continue being that great person.
Yeah.
And just doing what you think is right.
Yeah. Continuing with the good, I love James Horner's score here. I don't think any of the Spider-Man movies have a bad score. I think they're all pretty good. You go from Elfman to Horner, and then, obviously we'll get into the Holland movies, but I liked Horner's theme a lot. His main theme and the score overall for this movie, I think, was really well done.
I do too. I'm a huge sucker for, like, soundtracks and scores, and this was definitely one of them. I remember when the Spider-Man movies came out a couple years ago, like No Way Home, it started getting me into wanting to get stuff for the Andrew Garfield movies, and I had both the score and soundtrack on CD.
Yeah.
And I still occasionally listen to them. I don't listen to them as much,
Yeah.
but it was good enough to where I was like, I need to own this.
I like Lizard's theme a lot too. I have one more thing in the good, but before we go to that, I want to see what else you have in the good, because I know this is up there for you. This is one of your faves.
Yeah, I would say, if anything, it might be something you brought up or you were going to bring up, but the selection of the villain is what was really good for me. I've always talked about it when we've discussed it, is that the selection as Lizard for, like, the villain, that immediately hooked me in as well.
Yeah.
Just because, when you think of, like, superheroes, like Spider-Man, immediately that comes to mind is, like, oh, Doc Ock, Green Goblin, that's who you expect to, and there's nothing wrong with those choices, because in the Raimi trilogy it shows those are great villains, but I like it when we can get to see, like, a live on-screen, like, adaptation of a villain that's not exactly, like, in the chamber right away when you think
for sure
these, like, heroes.
Yeah.
And for the selection to be Lizard, it immediately, like, hooked me, and I was like, okay, I want to see how this is done. It's kind of like with the Batman. How for that one it was the Riddler.
Yeah.
Again,
Loved it.
You think of Batman, you're not thinking of the Riddler right away for, like, a main villain, and they, like, built up these, like, I would say kind of lower tier villains up in the movie to where they become these big threats and show them that, like, they can be menacing just as much as these big house names
For
that
sure.
you're thinking of.
Yeah, the inclusion of Lizard for me is also a good. I think it's because we were also teased a little bit. You know, we have Kurt Connors appearing in I think all three of Raimi's movies. I don't know if he has a presence in the third one, but you know he's one of the professors for Toby in the movies, and so if you're a Spider-Man fan, you know who Kurt Connors is, and so you know we're teased and we're teased, and we never get a Lizard in those movies. And I think being teased by that character being there, but never getting his darker side, is what led me to liking the choice of the villain here. And I've always played the Spider-Man video games growing up, and Lizard was always a fun battle. So I was really happy to see it was Lizard as well. I think the inclusion of Lizard was a good thing.
Yeah, and it was just portrayed really well, and the writing for it, and just, again, building up to being more than just a scientist that turns into a small-time villain, but no, that he's this big, menacing, like, antagonist, and that he has a plan that is going to affect the whole city, that it's just not bringing in Spider-Man, it's also bringing in, like, all of New York, like, with the construction workers helping him to get to Oscorp, and bringing in the police as well.
I didn't love every aspect of his plan, but we'll dive into that a little bit later.
There's some parts of his plan that is like, ooh.
But for good, I did like the inclusion of him. You know, like you said, it's always just, it's good to see variety. You know, how many times have we seen the Joker in a Batman movie? So switching things up is always nice. And, you know, we're 5 years out of Raimi's trilogy when this movie comes out. And so if you're Mark Webb, you're like, okay, let's kind of stay away from Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Sandman, and Venom. And that's what he does. And I think he does a great job with it.
I couldn't agree more.
At least marketing it. But is there anything else you'd like to add in the good before we hop over?
In the good? Honestly, I think I'm content.
Okay.
In the good.
So we'll hop over to the meh. And I do have a Lizard knock here in the meh. I would put some aspects of the look here.
His design, and I feel like you're going to say, but the biggest design flaw for me even though just went on this rant talking about how great it was for him, his design, though, I would say it's mostly the face.
Yes.
The face.
Yep.
The face is what gets me, because, like, you see all these other versions of, like, Lizard, and the face is at least, like, protruding out a bit. As for his, it's just very flat.
Yeah.
Kind of, like, as if his nose is just tucked in and it's not there. I would say it's more like a Voldemort kind of appearance.
Yeah, they went for a very humanoid lizard look, and I get that. It's literally a human-turned lizard. I loved the size. I think they went great on the size, making people were thinking this guy was a dinosaur on the bridge. I liked the largeness of the lizard, and I get they went for that realistic, scaly look, but again, I thought a little protrusion from the face would have been awesome. Would have felt like the cartoons, the comics, and I wish he wore his lab coat more. And that's another thing, again, from the cartoons that I loved. And when we got Lizard, I always liked that that's his only article of clothing is he's like the Hulk, you know, he's always wearing the busted out the pants that are busted out and look like shorts. I always love that the Lizard has his lab coat on.
And I couldn't agree more with that, because there's multiple scenes where he looks like that iconic Lizard, and then within maybe 2 to 3 minutes of him fully being transformed, he's immediately ripping it off, and it's just, why are you doing that? Kind of like in towards the end there, where he's finally getting his last plan started, and he's like surrounded by the task force and everything, and they gun him down. As soon as he gets back up, he just rips it off and then releases the toxin out to that SWAT team. He was like,
keep it on.
It was like, nothing was wrong with the jacket. Nothing was wrong. Just keep it on.
Yeah. Another I'd throw some of the writing here. So I know that, again, we talked about it. That kind of is what the biggest knock for this movie is. It wasn't the most well-written Spider-Man movie, and I think that's where it gets its decisive nature of this film, where it's so mixed in reviews. Like I said, I really liked the relationship aspect of the writing. I even liked, some of the origin writing of Spider-Man. They did change things up a bit from Raimi's origin story. It has similar elements that, you can't change much. It's a Spider-Man movie. But I did like some of that. I would say most of the writing flaws for me are nitpick things or my one bad, which we'll get into. But when I mean nitpick things, like scenes like the day after the bridge, when Kurt Connors comes back down, Peter visits him, and he's like, hey, there's this thing that I wanted to know more about lizards, and he's like playing it off like it's a biological thing. At the end of the conversation, you can tell Kurt Connors is a little peeved, and he's rushing, and he's like, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. and then he leaves, and Andrew Garfield stays back and finds that the rat is eating the other rat.
That Fred like had mutated.
Yeah.
And I would say the exact same thing for the writing, because it's just really being like nitpicky, or like
It's like
just seems,
inconsistencies. He asked him to leave, but then he left first. Like,
yeah, or I would say they're kind of like cringy moments
Yeah.
of like talk. Like one that really sticks with me, where when it's the dinner at Gwen's house, Peter comes in through the fire escape, and he like knocks on the window, and she's like, "Oh, how'd you get up here?" Then even himself, he like just goes, "Fire escape."
yeah,
Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
So what's the point? What was the point of that line of her like,
Yeah.
"How'd you get up here?" It's almost insane. Like he's standing exactly on the thing that helped him get there.
yeah. And then, yeah, it's just things like that. There's a lot of nitpicky things, a lot of inconsistencies, but it's not enough to ruin the movie for me. I still, as an overall overarching story, enjoyed this a lot.
It's like dialogue that it doesn't break the scene, but was it really necessary for them to say that 1 to 2 lines, or should we have just moved on to the next part, or maybe done like a dramatic look at something? But yeah, it's small lines like those where it kind of disrupts the flow, kind of like a speed bump, but it's not going to stop the journey of the entire way.
But that's really all I have in the meh.
I would agree with that, honestly, and kind of maybe going from bad to meh for me was, I would say, the speed of transformations. Like for Peter, how on the subway he's already experiencing these changes in like his strength, his body, everything. As for like in the Raimi trilogy, Peter takes like a nap, he like passes out, and it's more aggressive and kind of seems more, I would say, reasonable to undergo these huge changes. As for Peter, he's just taking a quick nap on the bus, and then he has the sticky hands and like the super strength all within the same day.
Yeah, that plays a little bit into the pacing, and I would probably put the pacing in the meh, now that I'm thinking about it, because this does have a slower start too, and then it's all of a sudden really fast, then it slows down again, then it's really fast. With the Raimi movies, I felt like it was very consistently flowed through all 3 movies. This one's the longest movie of the first 4 Spider-Man movies we get, and it just, the pacing's kind of, again, inconsistent is a good word to use with some elements of this film. And again, it's not inconsistent enough to where I'm like, oh, this film's unwatchable, because I still love this movie. But it definitely hurts it in some areas.
Yeah, and with that pacing and like kind of the transformation thing would also go for Connors as well. Like he wakes up, he has the arm, he's fully fine, but before he even makes it out of his office, he's already experiencing these transformations. And when he said, "Take the bridge," he doesn't even make it to the bridge before fully transforming.
Yeah.
Like he's already busted out of the taxi, we see it didn't even make the bridge, and then that's where he unleashes his mayhem.
Yeah.
And kind of like the pacing, I would say, of like something's like with the van, how the gas is leaking down it, and then it didn't start into a small flame, it just immediately ablazed.
Engulfed it, yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, that's not how fast that fire would actually be. There would at least be a little bit more time before. But the pacing of some things, that's where it is in the meh for me. And kind of Peter's like usage of powers, I would say. Like at the start, he didn't know how to turn it on or off, but then like it's convenient at times that he can control it, and then sometimes he can't.
Yeah.
Like how he went after the train, the rest of the day, he knew how to control himself. But then he wakes up the next day and he's struggling again to control his powers because he destroys his bathroom.
Yeah.
Then he transitions to studying on the like kind of like window roofish kind of area where Ben sees him. And he's perfectly fine just balancing there and like reading and flipping through these very important documents. They're not sticking to his hand, or he's not like flying like or like flinging the folder.
Yeah.
It kind of seemed inconsistent in some of those parts, but that's why it's in the meh. Like you said, it's with the dialogue, nitpicking.
Yeah.
If you really want to kind of like CinemaSins, like nitpick.
Yeah.
But it's not going to overall disrupt the feeling, rating of the movie.
For sure. So we'll hop over to the bad, and I only have one bad, and I think that's Connor's plan. Connor's overarching plan this entire movie is he wants everybody to be equal, and to do that, he's going to make everybody a lizard. And I don't love that plan. I think making everybody a lizard for a different reason maybe might have been cool, but like, I get it. Like, lizards grow their arms back, but will that make everybody equal? Are there not different sized lizards? Are not some lizards stronger than other lizards? Are there not blind lizards? I don't know. Like, I don't know a bunch of lizard lore, but like, it just seems like that's a really weird way to make everybody equal.
Yeah, and kind of an example of like his plan in motion is when he uses it on that task force. Like, some of them experience different mutation off the rip. Like, we see one guard, he's laying against the wall, his face is primarily changing, his tongue, and then there's one where his face is completely untouched, but his hands kind of are like the claws and everything like that. So it shows that, like, that's not equal.
Yeah.
They're experiencing different mutation. And his plan, I would say, kind of what also gets me upset about it is after their encounter in the sewer, Peter goes down there, he finds his little, like, hideout, and conveniently playing and plotting in on the computer and on these blueprints of Oscorp is everything circled, and it's all playing at the same... on the screen, it's playing the overall, like, projection of what's gonna happen. That it shows Connor's, like, putting in, I would say... What is it? This, like, formula, I would say?
Yeah, not serum, because the serum is the antidote, but I mean, I guess they're both serums.
Yeah.
But
it's more of a terminology.
The poison, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
But
you can see, like, on that low display, like, it's kind of like, if you're just watching, like, or if you're playing any sort of, like, strategic game, you see that it shows Lil Connors going up to the device at Oscorp, and then it just shows him using the poison and then spreading that cloud, and then there's just a bunch of lizards going out. How convenient that's playing right as Peter is
walking in.
Yeah, as he's knocking there, he's not even there, and of course that, like, the device is, like, circled on the Oscorp map, and when it's shown earlier, and he even points it out to Connors, he's like, yeah, we were going to use it, but now it's collecting dust. That doesn't look like it's collecting dust. It's online. It's active. It's powered. If it's collecting dust, he would have maybe had to, like, remove, like, a clear tarp or something.
Exactly.
And actually clear off the dust, being like, oh yeah, this is interesting. But no, this thing that my dad and you have been working on, you're saying is collecting dust, looks like it's part of the maintenance or, like, the cleanup crew's, like, task to make sure you clean that off. Make sure it's still looking good. Yeah. But his plan just... It's very flawed. And, like,
it's very flawed.
And the fact of, like, being equal...
Yeah. So that's why I put it in the bad. But, at the end of the day, it brings us to an awesome fight scene. It brings us to, Peter trying to get there in time and, the cranes. And it brings us to a fun, action-packed third act. So you can look past it a bit. But when you really dive into this movie and you think about it, you're like, at the end of the day... His method for madness and why he wanted to do what he was going to do wasn't probably the best reason.
No, not at all. And there's, like, a whole bunch of avenues you can think of that would have made more sense for him, like, with him missing his arm. If his plan was to take a bunch of, like, victims as well, like amputee victims, anything like that, give them the poison, and then they take over the city, that would have made a whole lot more sense instead of just, I want to turn everybody into lizards so they're all equal. But this poison's primarily to help those who, like, have suffered some sort of loss. Yeah. To a completely normal person, it's not going to really affect them. Yeah. Making them big and green. Trying to make the plan make sense just is going to hurt you in the end. Yeah. It's going to hurt your thought process, and at least it kind of shows you that his mind was not clear, that the poison had gotten to him, and the madness was rolling. But at least in other movies, that madness made some sort of sense when you put yourself in their shoes. But when you do it in this one, you can't see a reason why, like, to be equal. Okay, that's your plan, but after everybody's a lizard, what now? Exactly. Is there anything else you have in the bad? I feel like that's really the only thing I'd classify as bad. I would say, for the bad, there was something I had in mind, but it was very insignificant, and it must not have been that important if it's passing out my mind right now.
There you go. Well, we'll hop over to the final thoughts and ratings then. What do you want to leave off with The Amazing Spider-Man, and what are you giving this bad boy out of 10?
My final thoughts on this movie is, for me personally, it's my favorite Spider-Man. I absolutely love it. There's always, like, how we discussed that first, like, there's people that are saying, like, oh, Tobey Maguire had the best Spider-Man, but his Peter Parker was poor. I think Andrew Garfield did amazing in both aspects. That's my final thoughts on it, is that, like, he was great in both roles.
Yeah.
Amazing selection for the villain and love interest. And my overall rating for this movie, out of 10, I would give this... For some reason, I wanted to originally give it a 9.5, but I think I'm going to give it a 9.2 out of 10.
9.2? Okay. For me, I love Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I think we get great action sequences. I think his mannerisms as Spidey are some of the best we've ever gotten on the big screen. I would say I probably like Tobey's Peter a little more, but at the end of the day, Andrew Garfield is the best actor to ever play Spider-Man, and that can't be taken away from him. Obviously, Tom's still early in his career. He has a chance to be great. But I would say as an actor, Andrew Garfield's the best we've ever gotten in Spider-Man. I enjoy this movie. I like it a lot. Are there flaws? Yes. But I don't think any of them are enough to kill the story for me, and I'm going to go an 8 out of 10. I enjoy this movie quite a bit.
I can see that. And I like that rating a lot, too.
I think I'd be up in the 9 range if we got a little better thought-out plan from the Lizard.
That's fair. I mean, for the bad...
Because I love the inclusion of him, but the execution...
is poor.
Yeah, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't great. But yeah, I can still have a fun enough time with this one, and I think, again, the part of it that weighs so heavy for me is that emotional aspect. I think, there's some scenes that are good pick-me-ups, and there's some scenes that allow you to let out a few tears in a good way.
Yeah, they really convey it perfectly, and it's almost like you're there. So,
for sure.
I agree.
That'll do it for The Amazing Spider-Man. Mo, thank you for coming on. We'll have you back next week for TASM 2.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
For sure.
That one, we'll definitely have a lot more to discuss.
Yeah. But thank you all for watching. If you like what you're watching, check out some of these other videos. Hit the subscribe button or follow the social links down below. Again, we thank you all for watching, and we will talk to you soon. Peace.